Hello boys and girls, thank you so much for joining us again this week as we have another lesson looking at the life of Jesus. And I thought what we'd do at the start of this lesson is just remind ourselves where we get all this information about Jesus from. Where do we get these stories and find out so much about him, his life and his teachings? Now, if you were sitting in front of me now, I would ask you that. I would say, where do we find out all about Jesus? And I know for sure you would all put your hands up and you would tell me we read all about Jesus from the Bible. And in particular, when we're looking at the life of Jesus, we're looking at the New Testament. Now, try and remember these things because I might ask them in the quiz at the end of the week. So the Bible, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is split into two. It is split into the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the Old Testament describes the time before Jesus was born. And the New Testament describes the time when Jesus was born and came to earth as a baby and onwards, his life and his death. And then the men and women who came after him and taught and told people all about him all over the world. So that's called the Old Testament and the New Testament. So we're reading about this in the New Testament. And in particular, so prick up your ears for the quiz. In particular, we read all about Jesus's life in what we call the Gospels. And gospel means good news. And the gospel books in the Bible, there are 4 of them, and they are called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And this is where we find out about Jesus's life. And this is where the true story I'm going to tell you today is found from these Gospels. So you can try and remember all of that for the quiz maybe at the end of the week. So what have we learned about in the past few weeks? Well, what we've been learning is, why did Jesus have to come? Why did he become a human? Why did he come as a little baby and grow into a man? Why did he have to come at all? And of course, from all the stories that we have been looking at, we know that he came to obey his Father and to carry out his Father's plan, which God had planned many, 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 many years and generations ago. And that plan was to rescue sinners, which is great news because we're all sinners and we need rescued. And we've been looking recently at the story of Jesus being baptized and how he obeyed his Father by being baptized. We looked at how Jesus obeyed his Father by going out into the wilderness, if you remember, for 40 days and for 40 nights. And we're told he was tempted there, and yet again he obeyed his Father and he did not sin and he did not give in to temptation. And then last week, if you remember, we looked at John the Baptist and how some of John the Baptist's followers or disciples were a bit upset because people were stopping following John the Baptist and were starting to follow Jesus. And we're literally following him around and listening to what Jesus had to say. And they didn't like this. But if you remember, John the Baptist was delighted that people were doing this. And John reminded his followers that his job, John's job, was to tell people about Jesus and to follow him, and to prepare people for Jesus coming so that they knew when Jesus came, they should follow him. So John was absolutely delighted that people were following Jesus. And so what we're going to do this week is we're going to look at a particular group of people who followed Jesus. And these are called his disciples. Now, you may have heard this word before. So as I said, disciples means follower. So somebody who follows round and listens to someone. And in those days, people would have followed perhaps what you call a rabbi or a teacher from the temple or from a synagogue if they were from the Jewish faith. And more often than not, what people would have done they would have listened to different rabbis, and they would have thought, I think I like the sound of this rabbi. I'm going to follow him. I'm going to listen to him, and I'm going to try and be like him. And other people would have said, I like this rabbi, so I'm going to follow this rabbi. I'm going to listen to him, and I'm going to follow him. And we're going to listen now to the story about how Jesus ended up with disciples, a particular group of disciples. And we're told in the Bible, as I said earlier in the Gospels, that Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee. Now, you might want to remember that. That could be a quiz question, I think. He was walking by the Sea of Galilee. And we're told that he saw two men in a boat, two brothers. And they were called Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. Now, Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And we are told that immediately Simon Peter and Andrew dropped their nets and they followed Jesus. So they didn't say, just give me a second, I'll just get these nets up into the boat, sort them out a wee bit, and then I'll come and follow you. We are told in the Bible very clearly that immediately they dropped everything and they followed Jesus. And then he walked on a little, and then for those of you, the older ones in your worksheet, there's a picture of this. We're told that he walked on and he saw two more brothers, James and John, with their father Zebedee. And once again, we're told Jesus called them. And we're told that they were mending their nets. They had got a bit broken, a bit of wear and tear, and they were mending their nets, doing a job that required probably quite a bit of concentration. And Jesus called them, and we're told that again, immediately, they dropped their nets and they followed Jesus. They didn't say, hang on, I just need to fix this little bit of net and then I'll be with you. They followed him immediately. So that was Simon Peter and Andrew, James and John. And then we come to another story in the Bible where we're told that as they were walking, they came across a man called Matthew. And now we're told that Matthew was a tax collector. And boys and girls, I have to tell you, back then, nobody liked tax collectors. Nobody. And people didn't like tax collectors because a tax collector took people's money from them. And quite a lot of the time in those days, it would have been quite unfair. So people would have earned money and then they would have taken more than they should have. And they weren't known as very good men. And so they weren't really liked at all. And Jesus came to this tax collector who people did not like, and he said to him, "Follow me." And yet again, we are told that this tax collector called Matthew dropped everything and he immediately started to follow Jesus. And that's amazing because they were all doing their jobs. They were all important jobs. They were all jobs that enabled them to earn money, to live. And yet when Jesus came, all of them immediately stopped what they were doing and they followed Jesus. Now, why did they do that? And the answer to that is they all knew that Jesus is far more important than anything. He is the most important thing in our lives. There is nothing more important than Jesus. And they knew that when they met Jesus. And that is why they dropped everything when Jesus called them. And what's also interesting, if you remember, I said when people would follow rabbis, people would choose a rabbi to follow. People would say, yes, I'll follow this teacher. But in this case, in the Bible, we are told that Jesus particularly picked these men. He came to them. He, as the teacher, came to them and said, "Follow me." And anyway, we're told that Matthew then had a big feast at his house. And there were lots and lots of people there. We're told that there were lots and lots of tax collectors there. Again, people didn't really like the tax collectors. and people who would have been described as sinners, people who very clearly did not live their lives according to God's rules. And the religious leaders were there as well, and they said to Jesus's followers, they said, why does this man Jesus allow all these people to be with him? Why does he let sinners and tax collectors be with him? He shouldn't be friends with naughty people like this. And Jesus heard this. He heard what they said. And what he said to them was, look, does a doctor come to fix people who are well? Or does a doctor come to fix people who are sick? And what he was trying to say was, he didn't come for people who thought they were good, people who thought they were ticking the boxes and doing a really good job. He came for people who knew that they were sinners, who knew that they were bad. And later on, we're told after this that Jesus took time and he went away with a group of the men and he picked 12 disciples. Now, I'm going to show you a picture. This is obviously not a real picture of the disciples, but it has all of their names, and maybe you or your mummy or daddy could take a screenshot because this might be useful for the quiz. But we're told that he picked 12 men in particular to be his followers. And the 12 men were Simon Peter and Andrew, James and John, and Matthew, who was the tax collector who we heard about. And then some of the others were Philip, Bartholomew, Thaddeus, James, Simon, Thomas, and Judas. So see if you'll not remember all of those names, but see how many names you can remember for our quiz when it comes to Zoom time. And he gathered these followers all together, and they were his. There were lots of people who followed Jesus, but these 12 disciples were the ones, his closest followers. And they would work very, very closely with Jesus and tell others all about him. So that's a little look at Jesus' disciples. Remember, when we think about why Jesus came to earth, he came to earth to obey God's plan. And so part of his plan would be that Jesus would teach people and that he would have his disciples that he could use to tell others about him as well. And it's also good to remember, and I'll be asking you about this in the quiz as well, is that when Jesus asked people to follow him, they left everything to do that. And the reason why they left everything was because Jesus is the most important. And the great news for us is we can follow Jesus too. In God's word, we are told that Jesus came to rescue us, that we are sinners, that we are in need of someone to come and rescue us. And that when we respond and follow Jesus and say, I want you to be my Lord, I want you to be my King, we can follow him as well, and we can be his disciples too. Okay, well, that's it for today. So I hope you can remember some of those facts. I might ask a few questions, but don't worry if you don't get them done. And if you get a chance to do your worksheets, that would be great. So as I said, the older ones, that's the front of your worksheet for this week, where you can see the disciples being called, and that's the back. So Jesus calling his disciples. And for the younger ones, you have the front of your worksheet looks like that. And then there's a picture again on the back of the fishermen in the boat for you to colour in if you can. If you can do those, that's great. I'll not be checking. But if you do them and you're proud of them, do bring them along to the Zoom. Or if you're not going to be at the Zoom, send me a picture so that we can look and share them around. That'd be great. Okay, everyone. Bye-bye.